All right. Good morning, everyone. Happy Earth Week and welcome to the Saving Monterey Portscast. We're so excited to have you here and celebrate our Earth this week. As we're getting started, I wanted to give a shout out and congratulations to our logo winners for our Earth Week logo contest. Congratulations to Zoe Soderberg, who is an eighth grader from Family Partnership Charter School, for her beautiful logo that is highlighting our diverse landscapes and wildlife in California. I also want to congratulate our two second place winners and our third place winner for this contest, as well as all of our participants. Thank you, everyone, for sharing your logos. All right. And with that, I think it is time to get our program started. So I want to welcome you all. Happy Earth Week again. My name is Isabella, and I work for California State Parks as an interpreter. So I have the really fun job of getting to share information and talk to students like you all about the cool things that you can see and do when you're visiting a California state park. And we are really excited to be joining you all today for this webinar. So during our program today, we're going to be spending about 45 minutes together. We are going to be watching your reaction, so you have the ability to press a reaction. I'm seeing lots of them coming through right now. And our Q&A is also open. So there will be times where we are asking you to answer questions, so you can type in answers and also ask some questions throughout our program. We will have time at the end to answer anything. Hi to our participants in the Q&A. Thank you all for being here. And I also want to say hi to someone else. I am joined by my friend and colleague, Ashley. Ashley, are you there?
Good morning, Isabella. Hello, everybody joining us this morning. My name is Ashley, and I am here at Point Lobos State Natural Reserve. So only about 20 minutes away from where Isabella is currently. And I'd love to start off by giving you all just a chance to look around because we are celebrating Earth Week this week. And here at Point Lobos, we continue to protect not only the land but the water as well. So let me go ahead and do a quick 180 real quick and with the camera here and get us focused on the water. I am here at Whalers Cove on the northern end of the reserve. And the waters here are part of something called a marine protected area, or an MPA for short. And these are very special places out in the ocean that are there to not only protect the animals that live there, but their habitats as well. And one of my most favorite habitats here at Point Lobos is going to be our giant kelp forest. Let me go ahead and pull up a photo real quick here to give you all a chance to take a look at what it looks like underneath the water. Let's see if I can find it. Here we go. Pull it up on here. And we have our giant kelp forest that is home to hundreds of different types of animals. And not only do animals live there, but people can still come and enjoy it. And in fact, as we were waiting to go live this morning, there were some scuba divers getting into the water. And let me go ahead and pass it on back to Isabella to give us a look around of where she is this morning.
All right. Thank you, Ashley. It is looking beautiful over at Point Lobos. And as Ashley mentioned, I am only about a 20-minute drive from Point Lobos right now. So I am at a beautiful California state park called Asilomar State Beach. I am also on the central coast of California. So let me pull up a map really quick. If you find that black arrow, that is where Ashley and I are right now. So we're in the middle of the state and also on the coast. We are next to the ocean. If we look at a zoomed in map, we are in the Monterey area. So I am over here, kind of on the Monterey Peninsula at Asilomar State Beach. And Ashley is way down here at Point Lobos, which is in the town of Carmel. And we are so excited to share these beautiful California state parks with you right now. Asilomar State Beach is in the town of Pacific Grove. And let's take a look at what is going on right now. And take a moment as we look around and share with a partner or even type into our chat some of your observations. What are you noticing? What can you see about Asilomar? You might notice the rocky shoreline, the waves that are crashing, the ocean in front of us, and the cloudy day. We love our coastal park units for giving us access to this beautiful ocean. And we are going to be talking about the ocean today and some of the ways that people have protected it and how also people have used the ocean in the past. So, for our program today, we are going to be highlighting conservation stories, ways that we have protected three different ocean animals: our abalone, sea otter, and whale. So this is what we are going to be talking about, how these animals were hunted in the past and are now protected. But to start us off, I want to ask you all about our human relationship to the ocean. And by that, I mean, how do people use the ocean? What are some of the ways that we use the ocean or that the ocean can help us? So take about another 30 seconds. You can again turn to a partner or type into our Q&A about some of the ways people use the ocean or how it can help us. Okay. I am seeing some awesome comments and ideas coming in. I'm seeing a comment about the ocean is a food source. I'm also seeing some comments about the ocean being a place where you can swim and you can help out the environment when you're at the ocean, visiting the ocean. It can also give us water. Yeah. Thank you all for sharing. Those are some of the great reasons of how the ocean can help us. The ocean is definitely a source of food. We get a lot of seafood from the ocean here in the Monterey Bay. Fishing is a big industry, so there's a lot of people who like to go fishing, and seafood is a reason why people like to come visit here. It is also a place for us to recreate. And by that, I mean play. We can go swimming, surfing, boating, kayaking. We can even just walk along the beach. That's one of my favorite things to do when I'm visiting the beach. It is also a place for us to learn. In the Monterey Bay, there's lots of really cool research, including deep sea research going on where scientists are discovering new species of animals. And it's a place where we can feel inspired and feel calm. So, a lot of really cool ways that humans are helped by the ocean, including that it is also a source of oxygen. There are plankton in the ocean that actually provide us about 50% or half of the oxygen that we breathe. So we thank the ocean for all of these great things that it provides us. But in the past, humans have really taken advantage of the ocean. We have sometimes overfished or overhunted different animals in the ocean. Sometimes we needed them for food. Sometimes we needed them for other things like oil or clothing. We had a lot of different animals in the ocean that we wanted to hunt. And this could sometimes throw the ocean out of balance and sometimes deplete the animals that we were hunting. So sometimes animals in the ocean have become endangered. Can I have you all put a hand on your head if you have heard the word endangered before? Put a hand on your head if you have heard that word. Okay. Seeing lots of thumbs up reactions coming in. Awesome. So endangered is a word that means when an animal, there's not a lot left of this type of animal in the wild, or it could be an animal or a plant. So it means that they have a small population and that they are at risk of becoming extinct. And I wanted to pass it to Ashley to talk a little bit more about the difference between being endangered and being extinct. What does that mean?
Thanks, Isabella. And if we continue over harvesting, overfishing, and there's already a small number of, say, a particular type of fish, if we continue taking more of that fish out of the water, eventually there's going to be no longer any more of that particular kind of fish. And so that's what an extinction is. And sometimes these extinctions can be natural. So let me go ahead and pull up a photo here. Some extinctions have been caused by ice ages, like the photo on the left. And then on the right hand side, thinking about our dinosaurs, that asteroid strike that caused those dinosaurs to become extinct. And other types of extinctions can be caused by humans. Animals are impacted by things like climate change, overfishing, um, a degradation, destroying habitats of these animals. But by people coming together and working to protect these animals, we can prevent these extinctions from happening. And so we're going to shift gears and talk about a few of these conservation stories within the Monterey Bay. I'm going to pass it back on over to Isabella to introduce us to our first animal.
All right. Thank you, Ashley, for helping us with that definition of what an extinction is. And I'm so excited to talk about the first animal who we are helping to protect and conserve. And this is what this animal looks like. Take a moment just to observe, and you can even share some guesses. What do you think this animal is? It's pretty unique looking. Okay, I am seeing some awesome guesses. Maybe this is a type of urchin, maybe an oyster. This is an animal that has a hard protective shell, and it is also a model of this animal, although it is pretty realistic looking. This is a type of snail. This is a type of ocean snail called the abalone. And these abalone are very cool looking. They have these black tentacles that are kind of sticking out, and this beautiful large shell that is protecting them. So abalone are a snail that they actually like to live in some of the rocky habitats and rocky areas right behind me. And they can also be found in the kelp forest. So if you remember that photo that Ashley showed us of the kelp forest, that is another place you can find these abalone. And they love to eat kelp. So they will usually crawl along the seafloor very slowly and wait for pieces of drifting kelp to kind of drift by, and they will grab some of that kelp. They have a mouth that would be right here, kind of on their underside, that they use to eat. And they also have a very strong foot. So abalone are able to stick onto rocks really well with their foot. And this is what can make it's a good defense mechanism for them to be able to hold on to rocks really hard. And that can make it hard for a predator like maybe a sea otter or even humans to pry them off of rocks. So I will show a quick picture of an abalone in a live abalone. It does look pretty similar to our model here. And again, you can see that beautiful shell of the abalone and some of its kind of black tentacles underneath. Now, if we look at an example of the shell without an animal in it, we can see another way that the abalone is able to survive. So I have an example of a smaller abalone shell right here. This one is just about the size of my hand. And take a look, just take a moment to see the inside of this shell. And you might notice there are these beautiful colors inside. You might see it's kind of shiny. There's I can see a couple different colors within this shell. Now, abalone, they make this, this is called nacre, Nacre, also known as mother of pearl, and it is a layer of calcium carbonate that actually acts as another type of protection for them. You can actually think of it as even like a bug spray. So if you're visiting somewhere where there might be mosquitoes or other types of bugs, you can apply bug spray to kind of get those bugs away. And abalone have this beautiful color because it is a way to actually repel any types of parasites or animals that might bother them or harm them. These might be tiny animals that could start feeding on the abalone. So this can help prevent that. And it's also a way just to kind of further protect themselves. So they have a beautiful shell. And the word abalone actually comes from the local indigenous word for abalone. So in this area, this is the ancestral land of the Rumsen Ohlone and Esselen people, as well as the Cocoon Turuk people. They have lived here and continue to live here and steward and protect this land as well. And their word for abalone is a loon. It is the word alloon. And when the Spanish arrived in this land, they took that word alloon and kind of adopted it and made it into the word abalone. So abalone, the word abalone has its roots in this area. And this is a very significant animal for the Rumsenoloni and the other people who live in this land. They would eat abalone, so it was a type of seafood. And also they The shells are really important. They can make the shells into jewelry, dance regalia. They can make them as part of baskets, and they even use them as shovels, which is really cool. So abalone is an animal that is just super cool with its ability that it's a type of seafood, as well as some of the ways we can use its shell. But unfortunately, it also has experienced some over harvesting in the past. I wanted to pass it over to Ashley to talk about some of the other history of our abalone.
Thank you so much, Isabella, for introducing us to our abalone. And here at Point Lobos, not only did the indigenous people utilize these abalone, but also the Chinese and Japanese people were harvesting it as well. And so when we think about the Chinese communities that arrived here at Point Lobos, they first arrived back in the 1850s, and they set up what is to be believed as the first fishing community in California. And they really understood how all the animals in the ocean were connected to each other and which animals were more abundant at certain times of the year. And so they would vary what types of animals they were focusing on. And so they would rotate between squid, sea urchins, um, and of course, our abalone. And then after the Chinese arrived, then groups of Japanese started arriving. And that's when the abalone fishery really started taking off. And these Japanese abalone harvesters first focused on finding those abalone that were in shallower waters. And once those abalone were depleted, they started moving to deeper waters. But when you get into deeper water, you need to adapt and change how you are finding those abalone, because sometimes it could be hidden in rock crevices, and in deeper water, maybe you can't hold your breath for a long enough amount of time to search for those abalone. So they adopted one of the first methods of scuba diving. They would don hard hat scuba suits. Let me go ahead and pull up a photo here. Let's see if I can find it. Bear with me for a second. Here we go. Pull that on up here. And if I zoom in on this photo, we can actually see a diver wearing one of those hard hat helmets. And these helmets were very heavy, making it easier for divers to get closer to the sea floor. And then on these little wooden boats would be a tube connected to a hand pump so that people that were still on the surface could pump air through this tube to the diver underwater. And then once these abalone were harvested, they would bring them back onto land and they would dry them out. And so let me pull up another photo here. And this photo is looking at just the far end of Whalers Cove called Coal Chute Point. And a lot's going on in this photo, including a railroad track, but also on these wooden racks are abalone that they are using the sun to dry out. And then if we are looking closely into the background of this photo, you might be able to notice a building there. And this building is actually was a old cannery. So let me pull up one other photo. Here we go. And so this was located right where the present day parking lot is. And this cannery was so successful that at its peak, it accounted for about 75% of all the commercially harvested abalone happening in California. And this was a partnership between a Japanese abalone harvester as well as a man named Alexander Allen, who purchased the property that is now Point Lobos. And so this cannery remained in action until right before Point Lobos became a state park, which happened in 1933. And so, throughout the years, abalone has still been fished throughout the coast of California. And unfortunately, the abalone fishery remains closed. And it's anticipated that it'll remain closed until at least 2026. But when we have areas like these marine protected areas, we can help protect these animals so that their population can recover. And there's one other resident of our kelp forest, in addition to this abalone, that I'm going to pass it back on over to Isabella to share a little bit more about one of our furrier friends here in the Monterey Bay.
Thank you, Ashley. That is so cool to learn about the abalone fishery over at Point Lobos. And we hope that the abalone populations will continue recovering so that at some point in the future, humans can start having them as seafood again, and so that there can be more food for these animals. So our next animal that we want to share with you all is the sea otter. Our sea otters also have a conservation story that is really important for the Monterey Bay. These are literally the furriest animals in the world. As Ashley was mentioning, they are super furry. Sea otters can have up to 1 million hairs per square inch on their body. So they have a super dense, super thick, and furry coat. Does anyone know why sea otters might need such a thick coat of fur? Any ideas? Hmm. You might be thinking that their coat really helps them keep warm in the water. In the Monterey Bay, the ocean water is pretty chilly. Ashley was actually scuba diving on Tuesday, and she said the water was about 48 degrees, which is definitely on the cold side. So otters rely on their thick coats of fur to really help keep themselves warm. And unfortunately, this is kind of where humans started hunting them for. So in the 1700s, there were Russian hunters who began hunting these sea otters to get their fur. They wanted to make their coats of fur into clothing for people. So sea otters began being hunted pretty heavily. They were hunted all up and down California's coast and also in Oregon and Washington because they used to range, they used to live all up and down the west coast of North America. And this was a hunting that was not done with any thoughts of sustainability or concerns about what if sea otters ran out. And sea otters were hunted to the point where they were actually believed to be extinct. So there was a period of time where people were just not seeing them and they thought that sea otters had gone extinct. But in Big Sur in the 1950s, there was actually a population of 50 sea otters that were discovered. So Big Sur is about an hour south down the coast of Ashley and I right now. These sea otters, because they were in a part of California that is pretty hard to reach and hard to get to, they had survived the hunting. And those 50 otters are now the ancestors of all the living sea otters in California. So we are lucky that those otters escaped hunting and were able to replenish the sea otter population in California. Now, as sea otters started coming back, they were starting to come back to the Monterey Bay in the 1960s once there was more protection for them. We started noticing some changes to the kelp forest habitat. And this is because sea otters, another way that they keep themselves warm in the water, is that they have a huge appetite. They have to eat about 25% of their body weight every day to stay alive. To put this into perspective for you, I would like you all to think about how many hamburgers, like a Big Mac hamburger, you could eat in one day. And I'd like you to put that number up on your fingers when you have the answer. How many Big Mac hamburgers do you think you could eat in one day? Okay, I'm seeing one answer about being vegetarian. I'm seeing 1, 2, 4, even 10. Those are some impressive numbers. Well, for our sea otter friend, this sea otter can actually eat, if it was weighing 100 pounds, this sea otter would be able to eat 100 Big Macs in a day of its life. So 100 Big Mac hamburgers for this one 100-pound sea otter. And they love to eat abalone. They can eat clams, worms, crabs, and also purple sea urchins. So otters tend to eat some of these animals that are grazers for the kelp, like abalone and these purple sea urchins. They like to eat the kelp. And in this way, sea otters can actually help to balance out the kelp forest habitat. They are able to control the amount of purple sea urchins and abalone so that they don't take over and overpopulate and start eating all of the kelp. Because this was happening in the Monterey Bay and throughout California, where the purple sea urchins were staking, they were kind of taking over and eating all the kelp because there was no predator that was eating them. So we love our sea otters. Not only are they just super furry and cute and awesome animals, but they play a really important role in keeping our kelp forests safe. And now our otters are protected. We have the Endangered Species Act, which is a law that is protecting our endangered species. We also have the Marine Mammal Protection Act that is prevents hunting or even harassment of marine mammals like our otter. So with these laws in place, it made it a lot easier for sea otters to come back into the Monterey Bay and do their important work in the kelp forest. Now, I would like to pass it to Ashley to highlight one other type of animal, a larger marine mammal that we have also protected.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Isabella, for sharing the wonderful story of the sea otters, one of my personal favorite animals here in the Monterey Bay. But we're going to go a little bit larger now. We've been talking about fairly small animals so far, but I think it's time that we talk about our famous gray whales because they have a very unique conservation story here in the Monterey Bay. And that story begins all the way back in about the 1860s or so when Portuguese whalers arrived to Point Lobos. And as you can imagine, back in the 1800s, this area probably looked fairly different from how it looks today. So let me go ahead and share a picture for us here to give you an idea of what it looked like. Because whaling did in fact happen right here in this cove, hence the name today, Whalers Cove. And so in this picture, we are looking towards where the parking lot is, where that cannery would have been standing for the abalone. And we can see a whale on the land right there. And these whale hunters were looking for the whale's blubber, that thick layer of fat that once they cut it off of the whale, they would put it in these giant pots and melt it down to create oil. And that oil was used for things like mostly in lanterns to be able to as a light source. And then at one point in time, something else was created, something called kerosene. And we made that shift from using this whale oil to using kerosene. And so this is just one of the many examples of how humans have made that shift between energy sources. And so it's to say that we should be able to make that shift again today to more renewable energy sources to help combat climate change. But as we were talking about these three animals today, a common thread is how people came together to protect these animals. And we can continue protecting these animals along with all of the other ones that call the Monterey Bay home. And so I'm going to pass it back on over to Isabella to talk a little bit about how we can continue protecting these animals in the Monterey Bay.
Awesome. Thank you, Ashley. Well, one way and one tool that we have that I want to highlight is something that Ashley actually brought up at the beginning of our program, and that is something called the Marine Protected Area. There is a Marine Protected Area at Point Lobos, and there's actually one here at Asilomar. These are just two of 124 Marine Protected Areas all up and down the California coast. And this is a really awesome way that people came together. It took years and years to create this network of marine protected areas, but we now have this network of, you can even think of them as charging zones for the ocean. They are ways that animals can have a lot of babies, they won't get fished, and they can make sure that there are enough fish and sea urchins and abalone in the water because they're places where humans are either not fishing at all or maybe only taking some of the animals out. And these marine protected areas are also great places for animals like our sea otter to find food. So even though otters, they're protected by now other laws, so they're not being hunted anymore. But we talked about how they have a huge appetite. So when they're visiting Asilomar State Marine Reserve or Point Lobos State Marine Reserve, they can also find a lot of the food that they need. Our marine protected areas are also keeping the habitats here safe from human impact. So our rocky areas, our kelp forests, they are all being protected as well. But I want to ask you all, if you're visiting a California state park or a marine protected area or another type of park, what are some things that you can do to protect the animals and their habitats when you visit? Take about 30 seconds and you can turn to a partner or type into the chat how you can protect these animals if you're visiting a park or a marine protected area. Okay. Seeing a great answer about not littering. That is very important. We can make sure if we're bringing maybe a bag of chips or a water bottle that those are ending up in the trash can or recycling bin. We can also just bring reusable water bottles or tote bags with us as well. I also am seeing some great comments about leaving these animals alone and not feeding them. Yeah, so when we are visiting a park, this is the animal's home, and it can be very stressful or even scary for them if we are maybe chasing them or trying to pet them. Sometimes it is even illegal to do that, like with sea otters or whales, because they're protected by law. It is illegal to actually get too close to them. So we can also be respectful for the wildlife and view them from a distance. And I love that I also saw a comment about not taking anything and not fishing or poaching. Yeah. So when we visit a place with all this beautiful nature, we can leave no trace. We can leave all the shells and rocks and animals behind because they belong here. This is their home. And it can also be enjoyed by future visitors who are coming here. So thank you all for sharing those ways that we can protect these animals. It's important to remember, especially because it is Earth Week, that our actions, our individual actions, are contagious. So when we're doing small things like being respectful of animals or throwing our trash away, this rubs off on people. It is setting a good example, and it can teach other people to also do that same thing and protect the parks like you are. So keep it up with some of these great actions, and you can be a part of the conservation stories of all the animals here in the Monterey Bay. So we want to thank you all so much for joining us during our Sportscast today, learning about these three animals, our abalone, sea otter, and gray whale, who were overhunted and are now protected. I would love to answer just a few questions before we go. I'm seeing quite a few in our chat. I'm seeing a good
Hey,
question. Oh, sorry.
hey Isabella, there's a really
Yeah.
great question that came in about if shells aren't being used anymore, why leave the shells? And that is an excellent question because if you're ever walking along the beach or exploring tide pools, and you pick up a shell, stick it in your pocket, and you say, well, it's just one shell. What's the big deal? And then lots of people come after you and do the same thing. What do you think is going to happen? Probably there's going to be no longer any shells left. And even if humans are not utilizing these shells, different types of animals could use them. Say, perhaps a hermit crab that as it grows needs to find larger shells as it continues to grow. And also, as those shells break down, it helps to add minerals back into the water to help new shells form for new animals. And so, when visiting the coastline, make sure that we are leaving those shells right when we found them.
That is great and such a good question. I've also seen some great questions about the whaling that happened. There's a question about if blue whales were hunted. They were not hunted in the Monterey Bay, from what I heard, or at least not as much as the gray whales, but they were hunted around the our global ocean, and they are a very endangered species. So blue whales are still endangered, and people are trying to help them with their populations to come back up. And this ties into another question about why did we choose to talk about sea otters and whales during our program? And we wanted to really highlight, because there's a lot of daunting and big problems with our environment, we wanted to highlight some of the ways that humans have helped these animals with passing laws, creating marine protected areas, and more. And we also wanted to highlight animals that we now see regularly. Ashley and I both get to see whales and sea otters throughout the year in our parks. But if we were here 100 years ago, we would probably not be seeing these animals that much. So it's also really important to remember that these animals used to not be around as much. They were very endangered, and now they are back to an amount that we get to see them throughout the year, which is really special. One of my favorite parts of working for California state parks, seeing this cool wildlife. All right. Now, I think it is just about time for us to wrap up because it is 10:45. So we want to thank you all again for joining us today at Asilomar State Beach and at Point Lobos State Natural Reserve. We hope you learned about our three cool ocean animals and how they have become protected and how they were used by people once. And we hope that you can keep protecting these animals just in your day-to-day lives. So thank you all for joining us and happy Earth Week. We will see you all next time.
Thank you, everybody. Happy Earth Week.